There's a long list of people that are sick. I'll let Ken take care of all that. But there's about 4 or 5 people that's all of a sudden it's come down with COVID. So let's keep them in mind. I think Steve and Kathy and Stephanie and TK and Mac and Linda. And so, but that's the reason why they're not here. So let's keep all them in our thoughts and prayers as we pray. But good to see this number out this morning. Jeff Henderson's here this morning, and he's going to teach the Bible class, preach both lessons today. And his wife Tanya is here as well. Hope I got that right. So, sometimes people tell me names, it goes in one ear and out the other. But after I see the name for a while, I do all right with it. But I have to see it for a little bit. But let's welcome them, and we look forward to the lesson this morning. And so I'm not going to say anything else. I'll let Jeff introduce himself to us, but it's sure good to have them with us this morning. And we look forward to the study. Anybody need one of the sheets? Okay.
As Brother Jim is passing those out, I will begin by saying how much I appreciate the opportunity in going to a congregation. You've been asked to teach the Bible study class. If you're not a regular member there or things of that nature, knowing what to present and how to present and things of that nature can be difficult. When I first heard from the elders and about the opportunity, I started running through my brain things that I could present today. And I'll go ahead and confess, if you want to call it the easy route, I took the easy route. Oftentimes, and I go to various congregations and I'm going to just teach once a Bible class, it's real convenient, if you will, to go and look at the one-chapter books of the Bible, whether it be Jude or maybe some of the smaller books in the Old Testament, the minor prophets, and just spend time looking at those things. The questions that you have are actually questions that are coming from a workbook that I am using currently on Wednesday night Bible study at Oakland. And the reason I say I'm going to take a little bit of an easy route is this is twofold. One, this is quick and I could get the questions out to you, and you could have some things that you could prepare ahead of time and know what I wanted to, at least some of the direction that we might have. Plus, it is a benefit for me that what I would have taught last Wednesday night while we were in Florida for a gospel meeting, since I didn't teach Wednesday night, I now get to teach this lesson, and I can proceed on and go on through the divided kingdom. So my goal this morning is to try to present this just as a Bible class that I would at a congregation where we've been studying. You don't have the title up there. This is actually lesson number 8. But I'm going to try to do this just like y'all have knowledge of what took place in lessons 1 through 7, and we could proceed on into lesson 9. So just an open discussion Bible class. This is during, and one other easy thing about this is that this lesson is not an unfamiliar story. My guess is that I could have just said we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 5, and you would very much of you would very likely have an idea of exactly what I'm going to look at. We're going to talk about Naaman and the things that are associated with him. Before we get started, I'll do what I normally do. Well, I've just got to get this out of my head. These are $10 readers, and I'm not quite used to them just yet. Whether I put them here and read and look out with my vision, or whether they go up on top of my head, I don't have to have them for a long distance and such. And the reason that I have these, well, let's say when you're on a kayak, you don't want to reach on the left side with your right hand because you might end up in the water. And when you're in the water, the glasses that are on your head may end up at the bottom of the Tennessee River. So just a little fair warning for you. 2 Kings chapter 5 is where we're going to be looking at today. And This study these lessons come from, and we've been looking at basically the divided kingdom, and we've been looking through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, and a title that I have given for that I found is Discontinuance Through Disobedience. And we've been focused, as the book of Kings do, a lot on the kings of Israel at the point in time that they get divided. And so I'll give you these divisions of the book. First through chapters 1 through 11, it's the end of the United Kingdom, the reign of Solomon. And starting in chapter 12, we have Israel being divided. And we recall the two kings. I think most of us probably can remember the two kings, the first kings of Israel and the first kings of Judah, because they sound so similar, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Jeroboam does not match up with the J of Judah. That's the way I remember it. Jeroboam matches up with the king of Israel. And so we've looked through, if you look through the book of 1 Kings, that's what you'll see recorded there. Notice in chapter 5, we're going to be in this section in 2 Kings 1 through 17 of Israel and Judah still divided. But at the point in time, you continue on in the book of 2 Kings, you get to chapter 18, Israel is going off into Assyrian captivity, and it's going to be Judah alone. We're in the middle of that period of time of Israel and Judah. Now, as we look through, and if you're familiar with the book of 2 Kings, you might recall that chapters 4, 5, and 6 focus a great deal upon the prophet Elisha. Now, I don't want to, it's not my goal anyway, to stand and just talk all class period. I cheated. I've watched some YouTube videos. I know that there's some interaction that takes place with the class. And now that I know, because I had emailed it to the elders and I see sheets of paper with questions and answers on them, I would appreciate, I would love some interaction. And so we'll start with, if we're talking about Elisha, how did Elisha come to be? Who did he follow? We'll start with just the very easy and basic questions, and I'm going to go ahead and tell Brother Jim, you can't answer this. You got to help me out just a little bit. All right. Who did Elisha follow? If we're going through the history of the Israelites and we're talking about prophets of God, what great prophet did Elisha follow? Elijah. And so we have here this section where this is just taking place of Elijah going up into heaven and Elisha taking on his mantle, and we start to see some interactions with Elisha and the kings of Israel. You might recall some of the things that have taken place in the earlier times. In chapter 4, there are several miracles that are recorded there. 5, depending upon how you count them, or 4, depending on how you count the miracle with the Shunammite woman, with her son and him dying and being raised from the dead, whether you count that as 1 instance or 2. But those things that are taking place. And then on into chapter 6, the things that occur with Elisha, and we're given these stories, these miracles that are performed, the floating axe head, the blinding of the Syrians that come in, and Elisha takes them into the city of Samaria. And then we have chapter 5 kind of squeezed here in the middle. Now, I've given a broad overview of the time frame, and Elisha is going to be during the time of one of the kings of Israel. Now, we know that Elisha was alive and working during the times of Jehoram, Jehu, Jehoahaz, and Jehoash. But exactly when this took place, we don't know. A lot of times when we read through the books of 2 Kings, we're given time frames because we learn that during the reign of Ahab, this was taking place. We saw that, you see that a lot in 2 Kings with the interaction between Elijah. We know that Elijah was during Ahab's reign because it says the king of Israel or the king of Judah. Here, 2 Kings chapter 5 and verse 1, now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor. but a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Thus and thus says the girl who is from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened when the king of Israel read the letter, that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." All right, so just in that reading, we have two individuals identified as kings. We have the king of Syria. We have Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Syria, and we have the king of Israel, but we don't know his name. So we don't know the exact time frame of when this took place. So looking at our questions, question number one was Naaman a part of the nation of Israel? Quick and easy answer. Was Naaman part of the nation of Israel? Nope. He was of what nation? Syria. And how does the Holy Spirit describe Naaman? Great and noble man. Okay. A man of valor. All right. A warrior. All right. Favored by the Lord. And the elephant in the room, he was a leper. All of those great accolades to see of, here's an individual. Now, as we think about this, and this is what I think we need to make sure we remember, is that Naaman, as a part of Syria, not a part of Israel, he's under no law of Moses. And we need to remind ourselves of that, because if it was an Israelite that was a leper, there were certain things that had to be done. They had to be outside the camp and things of that nature that go on. There's no stipulations for that with Naaman. And despite what we might read or understand about the various degrees of leprosy, I don't know that it's any reason for us to spend a whole lot of time or think about all of that, just to know that this was a condition that Naaman had, and kind of the insight we get to the degree of the leprosy of Naaman is, spoiler alert, what we're going to learn about it being transferred to Gehazi later on at the end of the chapter. So here is a man, he's a mighty man, he's a man of valor, but yet he is a leper. All right, so continuing on in our questions and looking at the things from verses 1 through 7, to whom does the passage give the credit for Naaman's success, and why does this seem odd? Who does the passage give credit for Naaman's success? From the Lord. Now, is that odd? I'll ask it that way. Is it odd? Why is it odd? Because we've just made the point. He's not of Israel. But is that odd? All right, so I've got yes and I've got no. How do I figure this out? It is somewhat odd if we look at it from the idea of, here the Lord is dealing with his children of Israel, but this is a good place to remind us that it's not really odd, because we need to remember God deals with all people. And that's perhaps one of the great lessons that we think about here, is when we look at passages like this, that we are reminded of the presence of God in all of these events and all of these things taking place. In fact, as we go through this chapter, there's going to be some statements made. One, that it's going to be shown that the Lord is God, and it's not he is the God of Israel and he's only the God of this place, that he is the God of all. And so it might seem a little odd in some ways for some, from looking at from one standpoint, but not really all of that strange as we consider that. I've got a couple of passages written here. Daniel chapter 4. Someone, I see right below me, a quick and easy electronic version. Daniel chapter 4. Sir, would you read chapter 4, verse 25? Daniel 4:25.
So they shall drive you from men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times you shall pass over. They shall pass over you till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses.
The Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and that's talking about Nebuchadnezzar, and God making sure that Nebuchadnezzar knew who he was. And so it's not really a strange thing to think that God, in whatever way he's doing it, is going to make sure that the Assyrians, Naaman at least, know, and whatever king in Israel. That's another side note. We don't know exactly which king, but I'm very confident that God regularly was trying to impress upon how many evil kings how many good kings in Israel? I want to ask it that way. How many good kings in Israel? 0. God is trying to impress upon these wicked kings of Israel that he is God. Trying to get them to return. Trying to get them to come back. And if he's doing that outside in other nations, so be it. That is God's right. Question number 3 says, for what reason could this young girl have been bitter about being in a Syrian's service? Let me remind you of what we saw in verse 2. And the Syrians had gone out and on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Let's see. Oh, that's the kings. And this is what I wanted to at least have up. I was a geography major in college. I have a degree in professional geography for whatever that's worth. I tell you that to let you know I enjoy maps. I like looking at where things are in relation to other things. And so maps are beneficial to me. Here is the city of Damascus. This is the area where Syria would be. And this is the trek that Naaman would have taken to get to Samaria, which is where Elisha is at this point in time, and with whatever king of Israel is there. And so I'll leave that up there. And I mention that because this border here between Israel and the Syrians, regularly throughout other places in the book of 2 Kings, we read of the attacks that the Syrians had. Chapter 6, when the Syrians are blinded. Well, Elisha blinds the Syrians. They were coming in. They were making raids and coming in and taking things back. And it happened that they took back this young captive who certainly knew who Elisha was and knew God's role in things. So question number 3, for what reason could this young girl have been bitter about being in a Syrian service? She was captive. Why would that make somebody bitter?
You've got the events that just happened recently in Israel where they were captured and carried off by Hamas. But were they bitter? Yeah. They were very bitter and wanted to get back to their homeland, wanted to get back to their families. They were trying to ransom them and get them back. Same situation here with this little girl.
This is not difficult to imagine. Do you like, let's just give this illustration. Let's say we're just shopping at Walmart. And you're going in to get all your groceries and you got your day planned out and everything's going well. You've got your cart full and you're ready to go to checkout. And then all of a sudden something happens, lights go out, everything's shut down, and you're kind of stuck there. Is that something that might cause you to get frustrated, aggravated? I got things to do. I got kids to pick up at school. I've got this to go on. And we can easily see this young girl could have been bitter, but it doesn't seem that she is. What an impressive thing to realize. The example of this young captive, this young girl, who is thinking about other people. If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. And there's no reason to think that providence of God and God is not working through these things with this young girl. She could have naturally been bitter. I think we all can easily see that could take place. But a lesson for us is to take advantage of the opportunities. If we happen to be stuck in Walmart somewhere and something goes wrong, well, let's stop and just think of, how can I be a positive influence in this situation? Things to consider from just these small indicators. Thoughts or questions that we've had thus far?
She must have been someone of great faith to be reacting the way she did.
I think so. Someone of great faith to react that way. Yes, sir.
One thought also is like other things in this chapter reflects, I think, on a good character of Naaman as well.
Yeah, Naaman is certainly put forth as someone that understands. He's got an open mind to see some things, and we'll talk about, if we get to it, the 2 mule loads of earth and what that might suggest and things.
That he's not abusive in his life or not abusive.
Yeah.
I don't know if she would have that attitude if he was.
Oh, excellent point. To see that circumstances are conducive to having this young maiden and her being of this attitude in mind. Other thoughts or questions? All right, we continue on in question number 4. It says, what was her prescription for Naaman's leprosy? I've kind of already answered that when she had said that if he had only been around the prophet who was in Samaria, that he would be healed. But what did the king of Israel think when he received the letter? And this is just one of those interesting things. I find it fascinating, at least, to have these, we know what that letter said. You know, when we were looking at books of history, and we're going to talk about one of the great letters in the New Testament this morning in our worship service, the letter to the church in Philippi. But to know that over this course of history, we know what the letter said. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, now be advised when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy. So the king of Israel hears that. How does the king of Israel respond when he receives that letter from the king of Syria? What's his reaction? Who do you think I am? Am I God? Now, there's something to think about. He says, am I God to kill and make alive? Just let that sit for a little bit and think what that might indicate. The king of Israel realizes God has power. Now, he's looking at this all the wrong way. He's looking at this as, well, it's coming from Syria, and so what does he think the Syrians are going to do? Yes, ma'am?
Well, if it doesn't come through, they're going to seek retribution because this is a very powerful man.
Yeah, I've sent my commander of the army over here. And I'm supposed to, but that's what the letter said, that you may heal him of his leprosy. It's not that it sent the letter and said, I heard about this prophet Elisha and the things that he can do. Now, this might have gotten lost in the translations. This might have gotten lost in the conversation that happened back and forth between Naaman's wife talking to Naaman and Naaman talking to the king of Syria, and the king of Syria saying things to the dictator that's going to write these letters down. But either way, when the king of Israel hears this, his first reaction is, Syria is trying to cause problems. What does he say there at the end of verse 7? I think I heard someone else mention it. Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. That's not really a strange thing to think about. We've already mentioned the idea that the Syrians are coming in on somewhat of a regular basis. Is it chapter 6? Yeah, on into chapter 6, in verse 8, now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such place. And he goes to that place, but Elisha is telling the king of Israel, hey, Syria is camped over there, don't go that way. And there's some questions going on. And so, yeah, the king of Israel has every right to think, this guy's just out to get me. He's seeking a quarrel. But God is working in all of this. It's behind the scenes. God is in control. And we get to verse 8. 2 Kings chapter 5 and verse 8. So it was when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king saying, why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. This is where I like to imagine, try to picture a scene in my mind of what's taking place. Probably not unknown to the townsfolks, even to Elisha himself, outside of him being kind of in tune with God and inspired in whatever way he was. But just local townfolks, not strange to think that they would have known when Naaman and his entourage shows up. His horses, his chariots, these are some outsiders, and they show up here. And then this talk starts happening around town of what's going on. And then the things of the king reading this letter, and he's trying to figure out why is this man doing this, and tearing his clothes, and just chatter and talk taking place. And word gets out. So it was when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes. And Elisha takes action. And he sends word to the king. Exactly where Elisha was in the town, there's lots of different things that we can think about throughout the book of Kings. We know that Elisha was in lots of other places, but it just happened to be in Samaria on this day that this took place. And again, that's not necessarily happenstance. That's God is working in this. But Elisha says, please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Elisha is very confident that something can be done. We don't know what it is yet. Well, we know because we read, but Elisha is confident in his ability to do something to make this man Naaman know there is a prophet in Israel. And that's kind of what was indicated with the servant girl, the slave. If only she'd gone to the prophet in Israel. Well, he's going to make sure that he knows. All right. Question number 5. This ought to be for Bible students. I'm sure there might even be some little ones in some Bible classes that know the response to this. What was Elisha's prescription for healing Naaman's leprosy? What did Elisha tell Naaman he needed to do in order to be healed of his leprosy? Wash in the Jordan River 7 times. Now, I'm not wrong. Is it possible that y'all have young children, right? Daniel and... No, you're not Daniel. Your last name is Tucker, and so you're Mr. and Mrs. Tucker, and your little ones, isn't that something that they probably have heard at some point in time? Very likely. This is a familiar story. What's he supposed to do? Go wash 7 times in the Jordan River. All right, let's get to our geography idea here. So here is Samaria, going straight over about 20 miles. If you look, and you can read, kind of the mountain ranges down through here. Naaman did not go straight from Samaria down to the Jordan River. These dotted lines indicate some old roads and paths, and some of them have been given names over the years of the King's Highway and very prominent routes that were taken between cities. This is the suggested that he possibly went down this way toward Jericho and got down to the Jordan River down there. That's more than any 20 miles. If he went straight across, that's over 20 miles, but because of the mountains, he doesn't do that. Simple instructions given. And Naaman's quite capable of doing that. But this, the next verse, he's been told in verse 10 of 2 Kings 5, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. Then verse 11, and this is a familiar passage. And I can't help but every time I read verse 11 think of the old King James. Brother Jim, you just happen to look at me right about the time that I'm thinking, I bet somewhere in your sermon catalog is probably a lesson possibly, very likely centered around the idea of, behold, I thought. Am I right? Yeah. I've got one in my category. That's the old King James. Behold, I thought. That's what Naaman says. The New King James renders it, indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. This is a classic example of man's thinking versus God's thinking. Elisha, the man of God, has said, this is what you need to do. But mankind says, but this is what I think. And so let's try to picture a little bit. Why is it? Why do you suppose Naaman had that idea? Is it strange for him to think that that was a way for this leprosy to be cured? Notoriety going to his head, filled with pride. Yeah, we're going to make some big show of it. But is that a strange thing to think about? Think about some possibilities of what it might have been like. Again, all things are happening in and around, and we don't know the exact time frame, but it is, we go back to Elijah. The things that happened with Elijah on Mount Carmel with King Ahab. Don't you think that there were other people that heard about that and things that just as news travels, and that this could be something that conjured up in his mind that you know, that was a great thing on Mount Carmel. They cut the bulls and they had the altar and there was fire from God, a big spectacular type thing. And Naaman could got it in his head that, oh, some spectacular thing is going to happen with me. Yes, sir.
And you're alluding to it, the thing that got him was, Donald's already said, his pride. I'm down there with this huge entourage with all this gold and silver and treasure that I'm going to reward this guy, and he won't even come out to me. He sends Gehazi out.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that. Yeah, Elisha doesn't even come out. Whatever it might have looked like, whether Naaman got to the door himself or whether he was still in his chariot with the horses and such outside, you know, what all that looked like, I don't know. But yeah, Elisha doesn't even walk outside. Elisha sends a messenger and says, hey, this is what he needs to go do. And Naaman has this idea. Behold, I thought. Indeed, I said to myself. Is that something that we can relate to? Something that's happened in your life, and you've got this mental picture. You've played this out in your mind of, well, I didn't think it was going to go that way. Yes, sir.
This is the same thing that happened when he went to the king. He's following the wisdom of men. That's who you go to, is the king.
Yes, just to make sure that this is mankind's thinking. That go to the king. He's the supreme ruler. Surely he can do these things. All right. Question number 6 is: did Naaman immediately follow the quote doctor's orders? Nope. Now the real question: why or why not? Because of his pride. Now, he refused because of his pride, but there are some other things that are indicated in the scriptures that were running through his mind. Yes, ma'am.
Well, if you look at it, he doesn't want to, I look at it, he doesn't want to do anything to cure his leprosy. He wants Elisha to come out and wave his hand over it. It's kind of like being baptized. A lot of people don't want to be baptized. They don't want to do that motion, the action. He doesn't want to do that. He wants somebody to come out and heal him, and then he's all done and he can go on his way. Wave his hand, make it grand.
Yeah, the end of verse 11 Surely, he will surely come out to me and stand and, notice his words, call on the name of his God. That gives us some insights. Call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. This magic act of, we have, we watch silly movies, we watch cartoons, our kids are familiar with these abracadabra, hocus pocus, and all these fun-filled phrases and ideas, and poof, and something's changed. That's the idea. But what does the next verse remind us of? There's a little bit more in this thinking of Naaman. Not only is that we see the pride in this, but there's some other things that he thinks about. In verse 12. Wait a second. You told me to go to the Jordan River? Isn't that a muddy place? And that might give us some insight into the actual location where this was taking place, down near Jericho. We're all very familiar with, as Bible students, of the things that have taken place and the stories that have been told, the Israelites crossing there, and lots of other things happen in that general area. And we look back and we see what that river looked like. He compares the Jordan River with these two other rivers, the Abana and the Pharpar. And he says, aren't they better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he's thinking about the Jordan River is too muddy. He's thinking about this is certainly would be a lot better in Damascus, and might even be looking at it that there's an offense in this, that behold, I thought. This is what he wanted to do. It just didn't seem reasonable to him. Next question is, how did Naaman intend to show his gratitude for Elisha? Before we get there, let's remind ourselves of what took place. Verse 13, who comes and corrects Naaman's thinking? A servant. So you think about it. We've got a servant girl, a slave girl, that's helping Naaman at the beginning. Now it's a servant that is helping him here. Might that give us some clues as to the kind of people we need to be? We want to be servant. We want to not be putting ourselves first, but be putting others first. So the servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? Verse 14, so he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Now in those 2 verses, we have to remember, he's left Samaria. He's traveled with his horses and chariots and his servants and all the things that he had, and he's gone to the Jordan, whether he went to the closest spot possible or if he actually did go down to Jericho. Either way, there was some distance traveled, and he did what he was asked to do, and he was restored. I cannot help but think that even though the inspired writer doesn't record it, I cannot help but think that verse 14, when he becomes clean, there's some happiness. There's some rejoicing that's going on. And I might even think along the lines of Philip and the eunuch in Acts chapter 8, as they went down in the water and the eunuch came up after being baptized and he went on his way rejoicing. I think we can see a little bit of insight in that, in what happens next. And that leads us to the question, how did Naaman intend to show his gratitude, his gratefulness, his thankfulness to Elisha? What did he propose to do? Give him a gift. He's going to pay him for it. He's brought all these things and he's going to offer them as a gift. And again, he's traveled all the way down. He could have, if he was there, he could have gone on over and gone straight up to Damascus. But we get some insight into this marvelous man, Naaman, that he says, oh, I'm going to go back. I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to go a little out of my way. I could have gone straight on home to Damascus, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I'm going to go back over to Samaria, and I'm going to offer these things. He returned to the man of God in verse 15, and he and all his aides, and came and stood before him, and he said, indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant. Now, isn't that what Elisha said earlier? Hey, send him to me. He'll know that there's a prophet in Israel. And there's an indication that Naaman realizes that. I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, read that with just a little bit of insight into what he says in verses 17 and 18. Not convinced that Naaman was fully convinced that God was God over all things because of what he says in the coming verses. But there is an acknowledgement from him that God is over all the earth. He is the God. Whatever gods of these other nations, the Assyrians, the Baals, the Ashtaroths that we read about in other places, Rimmon that we'll talk about here is just another name for the Baals. Naaman has had something impressed upon his mind. And so how does Elisha respond to Naaman? Absolutely. As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused it. No, I'm not taking this. This was not my doings. This is God at work in this. And then we have verses 17, 18, and 19. And perhaps of all the part of the story, this might be the most confusing aspect about it. Simple to understand the story of Naaman. He came, he saw Elijah. Elisha told him to do what he did. He finally does go and do that. He is cleansed of his leprosy. And then verse 17. So Naaman said, "Then if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth. For your servant will no longer offer either burnt offerings or sacrifices to other God, but to the Lord." Now, I think it's a general understanding that a lot of heathen, pagan individuals see God as a God over an area. And I think we get some insight into that with even what we're familiar with Greek and Roman mythology. You know, there's a God of the sun, and there's a God of the sea, and there's a God of the wind, and a God of fertility, and God of the fruits, and so we kind of get this insight. And I don't think that is something that is too far-fetched in this day when Elisha was living. In fact, we can go back to some previous encounters in the book of Kings, and we have armies that are saying, oh, well, they were only productive, they were only victors because we fought in the hills. Now we need to go fight them in the plains, in the flatlands. If we fight them over there, then that God, And so we get the idea that there's, in their mind, a God of the hills and a God of the plains. And the God of the hills is the one that helped them out, not having an understanding of Jehovah God. And so Naaman, it seems that he wants to carry some of this earth back with him so that this could be something that would continue to bless him. And there's some other indicators of this with even the minds of the Jews. When they went off into foreign lands and built synagogues and things, they took physical dirt from the land of Canaan to these other places. Verse 18, "Yet in this thing may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes in the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord please pardon your servant in this thing." He said to him, "Go in peace." So he departed from him a short distance. I'll go ahead and say, I don't know that I know exactly what's being said here. The indication, it seems to me, is that there's an acknowledgement from Naaman of God, and he doesn't want to disappoint. And he realizes that he's been offering worship with the king and others to this God of Rimmon. He's trying his best to remedy that. He's thinking at least through this. And I think that's a noble thing. Here is the idea, perhaps, of a seed has been planted. And that's caused him to rethink some things. And he's going to continue on, and he's going to try to do better. When we see in verse 19, Elisha says, "Go in peace." There are some that have suggested that that's Elisha giving full credence to you go and you stand in that idol temple and you worship them and God's okay with it. I don't think that's what Elisha's saying. It just doesn't match up and fit with what we see in the scriptures. I think Elisha is just simply saying, safe travels. And I think that's good, because if we're looking at it from the idea of, here's a seed that's been planted, God has the power. God is not dealing with the Assyrian nations in various ways. God is not only dealing with the Israelites and the Jews and His chosen people. We know that He still has interactions and dealings with the Gentiles, the other nations. And that seed has been planted. And God, through His providence, could have watered that and let it grow into some other things. And Elisha's wishing him safe travels. All right. We need to get through the second half of this chapter and the next big story that takes place, where we focus more upon the servant of Elisha, named Gehazi. Question 9 says, why did Gehazi chase after Naaman once Elisha refused his gift in the last time? So what does Gehazi do? So Naaman has offered Elisha these gifts. Elisha has refused. Naaman offered him again. He refused. And he says, I bid you farewell. Have safe travels. And then Gehazi runs after Naaman. What is Gehazi doing? Say again? Gehazi is a greedy individual. He saw all the things that had been brought by Naaman and his entourage. The 10 talents of silver, the shekels of gold, the changes of clothing. And he goes and he runs and catches up with Naaman. And there are 2 lies that Gehazi tells. What's the first one that Gehazi says? All right, say again. Okay, my master has sent me. Let's go a little deeper into that. What else does he say? My master sent me and...
He makes up this story of these 2 young prophets that had come and they need change of clothes and silver. So that Elisha had told the servant to tell him.
Yeah. So verse 22, after Naaman, the cordial response is all well, all is well. My master has sent me. Yeah, he starts off just a bold-faced lie. My master has sent me. Indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophet have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. One, Elisha sent me. That was a lie. But he continues that lie and forges this tale of these prophets. Now, this was not something that was not out of the realm of possibility. We know of the various schools of prophets that were in the various areas and how they would interact with Elisha and such. Naaman, being the guy that he is, says, please take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments and handed them to the servants, and they carried them on ahead of them. So Naaman's living up to the good guy that he seems to be, this admirable, honorable individual. And, you need some help? I'm willing to help you out. Let me do that. He takes them from his hand. He stores them away in his house. He lets the men go, and they departed. So, and the way I counted these lies is that was the first lie that he lied to Naaman. And maybe we call that lie 1A and 1B, however you want to do it. But then there's another thing, another individual he lies to. In verse 25, and just like always, I get caught by the bell. Gehazi lies to Elisha. And because of that, verse 27, therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went away from his presence, leprous as white as snow. Yes, sir.
I got to add to that, because before all these lies, he says, as the Lord lives, he's just included God in this deception. That may be the bigger issue.
Absolutely. To place God as a part of this tale when we saw it earlier in the previous other individuals, putting God in this place, not a good thing to do. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I appreciate your patience this morning.